helping develop the city's intrinsic cultural values.
Well, amalgamation was supposed to bring our city together, but one could argue it only further divided us politically. Joining me now is University of Toronto professor Chris Cochran. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
And you've been studying the political landscape and the changing landscape, not only in this city, but across the country. So let's start with Toronto. And, you know, we saw amalgamation there and the 6 boroughs coming into that one city hall, but yet there's such a divide in this city. It's like the left against the right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in Toronto, one of the things that really is captured in the left-right divide is the suburban-urban divide. There's some pretty significant differences, not just between the types of people, but the kinds of life priorities that people in the suburbs might have compared to some of the people living downtown. It's an incredibly challenging task for politicians to try to reconcile within one level of government all of the competing interests that make up the city.
And when you look at the country, we've often felt that Canada is on the same page. And now in this new Trump world, you're starting to see cracks in that division, aren't you?
One of the things that really started to happen in the 1980s in Canada is that we reverted to a kind of a left-right pattern of political disagreement that characterizes the politics really of just about every other democratic country. We were exceptional in a lot of ways up until then. And what's changed is that now we really aren't exceptional anymore. We look a lot like other countries, the United States in particular, and so it's not a surprise that as you see the rise of Donald Trump, which was several decades in the making, frankly, in the United States, you also start to see the telltale signs of that line of political disagreement emerge in Canada as well. The question will be whether or not we continue on that trajectory for the next decade and where it leads us if we do continue on that trajectory. But by all estimations and all sort of signs at this point is that's exactly the path that we're on.
I want to talk a little about our exclusive data from our Canada Project survey. And, you know, you mentioned the anti-immigrant stance. And what we found was that, you know, should Canada continue to accept Syrian refugees? And only 57% agreed. So it's not overwhelming. You can see that there is still a split there.
Yeah, I mean, Canadians consistently appear as one of the most tolerant people, survey after survey after survey. There have been some changes, though, in the past few years, and one in particular has to do with the question of religion. There's very few people nowadays who at least come out politically and say they're avowedly racist or that they oppose people who look different or act different or speak differently. But when it comes to religion, there's certainly no shortage of people that have concerns about religion. They often direct those concerns toward Islam in particular, and the evidence suggests from the survey and others that there are no shortage of Canadians who are buying into those arguments.
On the environment, that's also a divisive issue.
Yeah, I mean, environmental issues are one of those things that people tend to support in the abstract, but when it comes to what costs they'd be willing to incur in order to protect the environment, that's where you start to see some slippage off of the environmental agenda. I mean, I think one of the challenges in Canada, given just the breadth and the geography of the country and the different economic interests in different parts of the country, is that it's very hard to get Canadians to buy into the fact that protecting the environment would be a cost that we would all have to bear. So, for instance, shutting down the oil sands is all fine and good to say in Ontario and in Quebec. That means something entirely different in Alberta. It's the same old Canadian story of having different proposals in different regions, and frankly, when it comes to the environment, the position seems to be quite often that it would be great, somebody should do something about this, but not me.
All right, Chris, thank you for joining us.
My
Thanks for your
pleasure.
insights.
My pleasure.